Today I'm going to read the short story Liberty by Julia Alvarez. As I read, I want you to think about what liberty actually means, how it's meant at the beginning of the story, and what it might mean by the end of the story. Little background on the story. The Dominican Republic is an island located southeast of the United States in the Caribbean Sea. Julia Alvarez, the author of this story, lived in the Dominican Republic in the 1950s. At that time, a brutal dictator named Rafael Trujillo ruled the country. Under his rule, people had few rights. In addition, the secret police dealt harshly with those who opposed Trujillo. Julia's father opposed Trujillo. As a result, Julia and her family were forced to flee the Dominican Republic when she was 10 years old. I'm going to read this story straight through the first time, and then as the week progresses, I will take you back into how to answer the questions that are in the side notes. Poppy came home with a dog whose kind we had never seen before, a black and white speckled electric current of energy. It was a special breed with papers, like a person with a birth certificate. Mommy just kept staring at the puppy with a cross look on her face. "It looks like a mess," she said. "Take it back." "Mommy, it's a gift." Poppy shook his head. It would have been an insult to Mr. Victor, who'd given us the dog. The American Consul wanted to thank us for all we'd done for him since he'd been assigned to our country. Little side note here. An American Consul is the person appointed by the United States government to represent American interests and provide assistance to Americans living in a foreign country. "If he wanted to thank us, he'd give us our visas," Mama grumbled. For a while now, my parents had been talking about going to the United States so Poppy could return to school. I couldn't understand why a grown-up, who could do whatever he wanted, would elect to go back to a place I so much wanted to get out of. On their faces, when they talked of leaving, there was a scared look I also couldn't understand. "Those visas will come soon," Poppy promised. But Mommy just kept shaking her head about the dog. She had had enough with 4 girls to take on, puppies too. Poppy explained that the dog would stay at the end of the yard in a pen. He would not be allowed in the house. He would not be pooping in Mommy's orchid garden. He would not be barking until late at night. A well-behaved dog, Papa concluded. An American dog. The little black and white puppy yanked at Poppy's trouser cuff with his mouth. "What shall we call you?" Poppy asked him. "Trouble," Mama suggested, kicking the puppy away. He had left Poppy's trousers to come slobber on her leg. "We will call him Liberty. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Poppy quoted the USA Constitution. "Hey, Liberty, you are a lucky sign." Liberty barked his little toy barks, and all his kids laughed. "Trouble." Mommy kept shaking her head as she walked away. Liberty trotted behind her as if he agreed that that was the better name for him. Mommy was right, too. Liberty turned out to be trouble. He ate all of Mommy's orchids, and that little hyperactive baton of a tail knocked things off the low coffee table whenever Liberty climbed on the couch to leave his footprints in among the flower prints. He tore up Mommy's garden, looked for buried treasure. Mommy screamed at Liberty and stamped her foot. "Pero sin vergüenza!" But Liberty just barked back at her. So visas are certificates granting official access to enter the country, and pero sin vergüenza is Spanish for shameless dog. "He doesn't understand Spanish," Poppy said lamely. "Maybe if you corrected him in English, he'd behave better." Mommy turned on him, her slippers still in midair. Her face looked as if she'd light into him after she was done with Liberty. "Let him go be a pet in his own country if he wants instructions in English." In recent weeks, Mommy had changed her tune about going to the United States. She wanted to stay in her own country. She didn't want Mr. Victor coming around our house and going off into the study with Poppy to talk over important things in low, worried voices. "All liberty involves sacrifice." Poppy said in a careful voice. Liberty gave a few perky barks as if he agreed with that. Mommy glared at Poppy. I told you I don't want trouble. She was going to say more, but her eyes fell on me and she stopped herself. Why aren't you with the others? She scolded. It was as if I had been the one who had dug up her lily bulbs. The truth was that after Liberty arrived, I never played with the others. It was as if I had found my double in another species. I had always been the tomboy, the live wire, the troublemaker, the one who was going to drive Mommy to drink, the one she was going to give away to the Haitians. While the sisters dressed pretty and stayed clean in the playroom, I was out roaming the world looking for trouble, and now I found someone to share my adventures. I'll take Liberty back to his pen, I offered. There was something I had figured out that Liberty had yet to learn, when to get out of Mommy's way. She didn't say yes, and she didn't say no. She seemed distracted, as if something else was on her mind. As I led Liberty away by his collar, I could see her talking to Poppy. Suddenly, she started to cry, and Poppy held her. It's okay, I consoled Liberty. Mommy doesn't mean it. She really does love you. She's just nervous. It was what my father always said when Mommy scolded me harshly. At the back of the property stood Liberty's pen, a chain-link fence around a dirt square at the center of which stood a doghouse. Poppy had built it when Liberty first came, a cute little house, but then he painted it a putrid green that reminded me of all the vegetables I didn't like. It was always a job to get Liberty to go into that pen. Sure enough, as soon as he saw where we were headed, he took off, barking toward the house, then swerved to the front yard to our favorite spot. It was a grassy knoll surrounded by a tall hibiscus hedge. At the center stood a tall, shady saman tree. From there, no one could see you up at the house. Whenever I did something wrong, this was where I hid out until the punishment winds blew over. That was where Liberty headed, and I was fast behind on his trail. Inside the clearing, I stopped short. Two strange men in dark glasses were crouched behind the hedge. The fat one had seized Liberty by the collar and was pulling so hard on it that poor Liberty was almost standing on his hind legs. When he saw me, Liberty began to bark, and the man holding him gave him a yank on the collar that made me sick to my stomach. I began to back away, but the other man grabbed my arm. "Not so fast," he said. Two little scared faces, my own, looked down at me from his glasses. I came for my dog," I said, on the verge of tears. "Good thing you found him," the man said. "Give the young lady her dog," he ordered his friend, and then he turned to me. "You haven't seen us, you understand?" I didn't understand. It was usually I who was the one lying, and grown-ups telling me to tell the truth. But I nodded, relieved when the man released my arm and Liberty was back in my hands. "It's okay, Liberty." I embraced him when I put him back in his pen. He was as sad as I was. We had both had a hard time with Mommy, but this was the first time we'd come across mean and scary people. The fat man had almost broken Liberty's neck, and the other one had left his fingerprints on my arms. After I locked up the pen, I watched Liberty wander back slowly to his house and actually go inside, turn around, and stick his little head out the door. He'd always avoided that ugly doghouse before. I walked back to my own house, head down to find my parents and tell them what I had seen. Overnight, it seemed, Mr. Victor moved in. He ate all his meals with us, stayed till late, and when he had to leave, someone from the embassy was left behind to keep an eye on things. Now, when Poppy and Mr. Victor talked, or when the Tios came over, they all went down to the back of the property near Liberty's pen to talk. Mommy had found some wires in the study behind the portrait of Poppy's great-grandmother, fanning herself with a painted fan. The wires ran behind a screen and then out a window, where there was a little box with a lot of other wires coming from different parts of the house. Mommy explained that it was no longer safe to talk in the house about certain things, but the only way you knew what those things were was when Mommy leveled her eyes on you, as if she were pressing the off button on your mouth. She did this every time I asked her what was going on. "Nothing," she said stiffly, and then she urged me to go outside and play, forgotten that the admonition to go study or I would flunk out of 5th grade, to go take a bath or the microbios would kill me, to drink my milk or I would grow up stunted with no teeth. Mommy seemed absent and tense and always in tears. Poppy was right. She was too nervous, poor thing. I myself was enjoying a heyday of liberty. Several times I even got away with having one of Mr. Victor's Coca-Colas for breakfast instead of my boiled milk with a beaten egg, which Liberty was able to enjoy instead. "You love that dog, don't you?" Mr. Victor asked me one day. He was standing by the pen with Poppy, waiting for the uncles. He had a funny accent that sounded like someone making fun of Spanish when he spoke it. I ran Liberty through some of the little tricks I had taught him, and Mr. Victor laughed. His face was full of freckles, so that it looked as if he and Liberty were kin. I had the impression that God had spilled a lot of his colors when he was making American things. Soon the uncles arrived, and the men set to talking. I wandered into the pen and sat beside Liberty with my back to the house and listened. The men were speaking in English, and I had picked up enough of it at school and in my parents' conversations to make out most of what was being said. They were planning some hunting expedition for a goat with guns to be delivered by Mr. Charlie. Poppy was going to have to leave the goat to the others because his tennis shoes were missing. Though I understood the words, or thought I did, none of it made sense. I knew my father did not own a pair of tennis shoes. We didn't know a Mr. Charlie. Who ever heard of hunting a goat? As Liberty and I sat there with the sun baking the tops of our heads, I had the sense that the world, as I knew it, was about to end. The image of the two men in mirror glasses flashed through my head. So as not to think about them, I put my arm around Liberty and buried my face in his neck.